What is going on, everybody? My name is Brian and welcome to my channel. Well, today we're gonna have to change this CV axle on this driver's side. I got to poking around when I was changing my oil and I happened to notice that the CV axle boot was actually ripped apart. There was a bunch of grease everywhere, and then I got to inspect them further, and then there's actually the front sway bar link right here. The end link just snapped, and that's actually what cut the boot. So I guess that's what you get for sticking your nose where it don't belong, but I have no idea how long I've been driving around like that, so the best thing to do is just going to be just to change the CV axle because of that. So as you can see, I've already got the tire pulled off. If you don't know how to pull the tire off, man, I'm sure there's videos to show you, and you can just search for that. But it's pretty straightforward. You just loosen the lug nuts and it pulls off. These, if you have the factory wheels, there's usually a center cap that goes over top of the lug nuts. You'll have some plastic lugs. You pull those, you pull the center cap, and you'll be able to reveal your axle nut right here. I do believe it's a 36 millimeter. We'll check whenever I go to pull it off. But if you don't have an impact, your best bet is going to be to pull your center cap off and loosen that nut while the tire is on the ground. Because as you can see right here, this will turn if you don't have your four-wheel drive engaged, which the four-wheel drive obviously not engaged. So if you try to take that off with a breaker bar or a ratchet, you'll probably need a breaker bar, honestly. Then you're just going to be spinning this. So if you lower it, if you pull it all, pull the center cap off, touch the tire to the ground, you can break it loose like that. I've already sprayed this with some penetrating fluid. I just used PB Blaster. I sprayed this, I sprayed this tie rod in case I got to take it off. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I don't know what all I have to pull off, but I'm figuring I'm probably going to have to pull this tie rod off. And I'm going to apologize for the audio. I don't have a lav mic, so I'm just going to use the audio in the camera. And it's probably going to be bad, but I don't want to drag out my shotgun mic and my big shotgun mic stand and all this just to do this video. So I'll try to do my best to edit it in post. So we're going to go ahead and crack this CV axle nut loose. And yes, it is a 36. Now, when you're out here, like I'm working from the ground, you can see I have this set up, and I am using a Harbor Freight jack stand in case you're wondering, but this is not one of the recalled ones. But you can also see that I have two other safety measures in place just in case something were to go wrong. I have this jack engaged, I have that jack engaged, and I have the jack stand engaged as well. So I have three different areas that would all have to fail for me to get hurt, because if this were to come down and my legs were under it, I would probably lose that part of my leg. So definitely be safe. And also you can see I have my little cart out here and just some tools that I may have to use for this, and I don't want to have to keep getting up, running back and forth. So try to stay organized. I always like to bring some magnetic trays out with me. That way I can keep the bolts separate. And if you don't know where the bolts go back, it's best to try to keep them all separate in different magnetic dishes. That way, when you go back through in order, you can put them back in reverse and you'll know which bolts go where. So just a little tip for you. So just gonna cut in real quick. I somehow lost the footage of the first step after removing the tire, which is you're going to remove your CV axle flange bolts, and they're really simple to remove. I believe they were a 15 millimeter on this particular truck, and as you'll see with me removing them, there's not much to it. You may have to actually turn the CV axle to be able to get to them a little better, and if you have the advantage of being able to come from up underneath, if your truck's on a lift or if you're laying on the ground, it may be a little easier to get to as well. And we'll get back to the video. There we go. Rip her straight out. All right, I think we got one, two more. All right, this is the last one. And as you've seen, it came right off. Now sometimes these flanges will stick together. If it does stick together, then you could take a hammer a dead blow or a little ball peen hammer or something and hit the flange, hit it around this area. If you're trying to obviously keep the CV axle, then you don't want to damage this boot. But if you hit it around this area, it'll usually pop loose. You can get it from underneath pretty easy. So let's see now if we can maneuver this out without having to remove this tie rod. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to remove the tie rod. It's just not enough room there. So to remove this, you're just gonna have to take this cotter pin out, and it's got a castle nut on it. All right, so it's a 17. Okay, I'm gonna have to remove the tie rod. I tried to take off the tie rod at the steering knuckle, but I'm gonna have to pull it off from the center link. To be able to not damage that the way it is, I'm going to use this ball joint removal tool, and we're gonna put it on and hope we don't damage this. Once I get this off, it should be pretty much about done. Now to use one of these, I assume it's just a little tool that what you do is you slide the little slot over the bolt on the inside of the tie rod, and the top part presses down on the tie rod and it will pop it loose. It's a 19 millimeter. I don't know if I can get an impact in there or not. I'm just going to use a wrench until it pops loose. There it went. Watch out, it'll scare you. It was in there. I'll clean all that up before we put it back on. But you see, now I can just pull this straight through here and it should come loose. There it goes. And we're loose. So we're going to clean this flange up a little bit. To do that, I'm just going to use my new Milwaukee Right angle die grinder that Milwaukee Tools so graciously sent out to me that I'm testing out, and I will have a video coming up either before this or after this. So if you're interested in this tool, I have this, they sent me this, and this straight die grinder. So I'll have a video coming on both of these. We're going to be using both of these in this video too. And she's looking like almost new again, huh? You don't necessarily have to do this, but it doesn't hurt. I mean, clean that up a little bit. You're gonna be putting fresh metal back onto there, so why not have it clean and ready to mate up without any rust in the way. And we'll just take a quick look inside right here. We can see they have some pretty big ball bearings right there, and the way this works is obviously this is going to give you a lot of wiggle room to move in any direction and to be able to keep turning like this. So this is pretty important, obviously, to have a good, strong, greased up CV axle on your truck like this here. Eventually, with there being no grease, there's just going to be so much heat and everything right there. Eventually I would have been driving down the road and this would have snapped. It's only like $84 for the new CV axle, which is right here. I actually got it from O'Reilly's. They was the ones able to get it to me the fastest. I don't necessarily have a preference between O'Reilly's and AutoZone. I'm not a big fan of AutoZone, but I mean, they're both essentially the same. The only thing I like about getting a part like this, obviously, is the convenience of being able to go get it, but also with there being a lifetime warranty on this, I won't have to buy another one. If something were to go wrong, I'll go swap it out. And the good thing about this truck is both of these sides are interchangeable, so even if my passenger side fails, I can get a new one. If I were to order it on Rock Auto or anything else, I probably would have saved some money, but then I have to deal with the whole warranty issue there, which I'm not sure how it works, if I have to mail them back the other part or what. So in the long run, I feel like you're better off just to buy something like this straight from the auto parts store, especially when you need it in a hurry. But we're going to compare the two, and they do look pretty similar. Well, this comes with a new nut and washer, so we don't have to worry about saving the old one and reusing it and cleaning it up. And you can see that this is old, it looks like to me. I mean, they're probably obviously remanufactured, but it is what it is. And we're gonna go ahead and install this now. Okay, to install this, you're just gonna simply push it right back up through the lower control arm and aim it towards where the shaft is gonna line up, and try to slide it in. You may have to do some adjusting to get it to push into the splines, but it's as simple as that. If you do have to adjust it a little bit, just pull it back, turn it a little bit until it lines up with the splines, or you could just turn the wheel on the outside until it lined up. But we see it went straight in pretty easy. Next, we're going to reinstall our flange bolts, but before we do, we're going to clean them up. And to clean them up, we're just going to use the straight grinder, like I said, with the little wire cup wheel on it. And these work great. We'll clamp it down in a vise and just hit the threads with these wire brushes, and it'll clean those threads off to make it a little bit easier going back in. And we got the flange bolts back in. Just lined it up, threaded them in a little bit at a time. I don't know the torque specs on these. I can't find them anywhere, so I'm gonna say tight, but I'm gonna say not super duper He-Man tight. As to where you're gonna break them, because like I said, I would hate to see you get to this point and break a bolt, or me, I would hate to see get to this point and break a bolt. So like I said, these are 15. We're gonna zip them back up and tighten them up. Make sure you're going in the right direction. Now I'm gonna hit these with the impact and run them in. I'm just using the little 3/8 impact. I mean, it's still pretty powerful, so I still gotta be a little careful. But after I do this, I'm gonna take a wrench and just make sure that they're tight. And that's all of them. So, all right, now we are finished. Under here, we're gonna put the tie rod ends back on. The torque specs that I can find for the tie rod end bolts are 46 foot-pounds. So we're gonna put those on, torque them down to spec, put our castle nuts back on, and put our cotter pins back in. Now, if you work on cars, you're gonna be dealing with cotter pins, and cotter pins suck. I hate cotter pins. They, especially if you're in a rusty area, they're gonna rust out. You might have to end up cutting them off. I'm gonna link down below a kit of cotter pins that I purchased on Amazon. That way I don't never have to worry about it when I deal with a cotter pin. I don't care if I destroy it or what, because I'm just gonna replace it every time. So check that out. I'll also link all of the tools that I use in this video and tools that I like down in the bottom as well. So make sure you check those out. Now, as a bonus real quick, the sway bar link. You would probably have to remove this. Maybe you might be able to finagle it out of there, but if you did have to remove this, these are relatively inexpensive and not very hard to replace. The only thing you need to know is the order which the bushings and the washers go in, which the washers go away from the bushings touching each other. So for instance, you got your little tube that goes in the middle, and that's what it's going to look like when it's done. You're going to have your bushings in between your two washers, and they're going to go underneath the sway bar. Okay, we've got the tie rods back on, torqued down. We got the new sway bar link installed, as you see. And now, all we're gonna do is tighten this axle nut down. And the torque specs, from what I can find, is 165 foot-pounds. So we're gonna drag out the big Matco digital torque wrench, and we're gonna torque this down to 165, and this job is done. All in all, if you didn't have to stop like I've had to stop and do everything else, I mean, honestly, if you don't run into any problems, you could do this job in a half hour or something, you know. There's not much to it, and anybody can do it, but you're just one snap rusty bolt away from, you know, turning this into a really long job. So I hope this helped. I'm sorry, I know the camera work ain't the best in the world, and I know everything ain't the best in the world, but you know, I figured I'm doing it, I might as well squeeze a video in out of it. But I appreciate y'all watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel and are into videos like this, projects, tips, tool reviews, and a lot more, make sure you subscribe below, because I'll have a lot coming up. Till next time, stay real.